Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Victor, and I'm going to be your anchor for today's training. We are continuing in our series of the ethical hacking and penetration testing training. It's an abridged version of the CompTIA PenTest course. This guide is for you if you're newbie, if you're experienced, and you want to learn everything just within 2-3 hour series. I've abridged the entire content into a 99-page slide. Right now we are on module 5, and we're going to be talking about the last stage, which is reporting and communication. Now, you have actually done your planning. You've taken everything into consideration. What are you going to pen test? What are you going to hack? What is going to be the restrictions you're going to have? What is the objective of the scan? What time of the day are you going to scan? Done your signed documents. You've taken care of most important things that you need to take care of with respect to going ahead and project managing this pen test program or this pen test project. Now, after your planning, the next thing you want to do is to start with some reconnaissance, footprinting, enumeration, then before you start your proper attack. Then, of course, you want to start using quite a whole lot of tools we've looked at in the previous module. And this is the last stage where you now need to report all of the things you've done, because every pen test have a goal, every pen test have a reason why it is being done. So the reason, is it for compliance issue? Compliance objective? Is it because you want to do a merger? Two companies want to come together, so all of the technology assets of company A is being pen tested upon, or the technology assets of company B, all of their websites, their networks, their mobile apps, their whatever. Or is it regulatory? So it all depends on why you were doing the pen testing in the first place. So at this stage, you want to now start reporting and communicating these results. Now, reporting and communicating, or communication. Report writing and handling best practices. Explain post-report delivery activities. Recommend mitigation strategies for discovered vulnerabilities. Actually, you're going to be doing number 3, recommendation, mitigation strategies, if that is covered within your scope. There are some pen tests that you want to carry out, and it's going to just be very brief, swift, atomize all of the vulnerabilities we have. There's some pen tests that are going to be more elaborate, where you want to atomize what the vulnerabilities are. You also want to recommend for us. Some pen testing, the scope can be, don't just atomize them, don't just recommend. Also put into consideration that we want you also to fix. You want you to fix all of those bugs and implement the countermeasures you are actually suggesting. So the scope encompasses the entire 3 phases: test, provide us mitigation strategies or countermeasures, then fix all of the vulnerabilities. If the first type of penetration testing is going to cost $1,000, it's never going to be the same if you're doing penetration testing for the second level, where you're going to now be suggesting, recommending, looking up standard guidelines, analyzing everything critically, suggesting mitigation strategies. And for the last one, if you are now going to be involved in fixing all of the bugs, all of the issues that you found out. Of course, the last stage is going to be more expensive. It's going to take more resources. It's going to take you more time, because you have to be thorough. Whatever you find out within scope, you are going to actually fix. What kind of questions are you going to expect on test day, for instance, if you are going to take the CompTIA PenTest exam? Given any scenario, you want to know what are those kind of things you want to suggest? What are those kind of activities? How are you going to communicate this to your client after you've conducted your pen test? Now, lots of communication is needed before the pen test, during and after the penetration testing. Depending what is atomized at the planning stage, you want to define your communication part. Are you going to be communicating through HR? Are you going to be communicating through the chief information officer, CIO, or technology officer? Are you going to be communicating through the CEO? Are you going to be, or is there a small team of staff members that you're going to be liable to, you're going to be communicating to? So that communication part is very critical, especially if you now get things, or things get bad, or a service is down, a website is down, an application is down, a network is down, a server is down, a mobile app service or API no longer communicates to Warriors, what they can actually use for their everyday business tasks. That's an issue. But if in planning stage you've already established the communication part, then it makes your reporting also very, very smooth and easy. Reasons. So situational awareness, the conflicting, the escalation. So in communicating, which is very important, don't forget that the reason for communicating in the first place is very important. Then do you just want to inform them of what is happening? That is situational awareness. Or something has happened, you detect an activity and you want to inform them. Or there is something that is very intense, of great magnitude. If you want to rate between the scale of 1 to 10, it's about 9, 10. So that kind of thing is has some great severity. You need to put in your scope document, in your planning document, who you're going to report that to. Triggers, stages. So you have communication that occurs at the assessment, moves from face to face, critical findings, a vulnerability you found, indicators of prior compromise. So in terms of prior compromise, at times you are being called to carry out pen testing. It's good that you ask a lot of questions to actually understand the real motive behind, apart from just regulatory issues and the rest. Some companies might have a prior compromise. They might have been hacked before then. They might have gotten an incident before then. So if you see attack signatures, if you see indicators of previous compromise, it's very important that you understand that you need to also communicate that, because they might be aware, they might not be aware. Then, of course, goal reprioritization. You don't want to, in project management, that's what to call scope creep. Scope creep is when you say, I want to build a 1, 2, 3 bedroom flat for a client. And by the time you start working, you now find out that you're going to be adding a BQ, a boys' quarters, or you're going to be adding a gatehouse, or you're going to be adding a car park, a carport. So scope creep is when you now go beyond what you originally intended to deploy. So goal reprioritization. Have any new information been found that might affect the goal or desired end state? You need to communicate that. So if you see new stuff, you need to say, I have seen this new stuff. Do you want us to proceed with it? Or should we just leave it out of what we're doing? We could come back for it later on. Or should we add it up? If we need to add it up, we need to re-examine, we need to re-quote, and we need to have a new price for this new tax. So you need to understand that. The communication part, is it going to be via text? Some companies will use Slack, some will use Skype, some will use WhatsApp, some will use Facebook, some will use email, some will use paper document. Depending on what works best for you, that communication path has to be decided. Then, of course, who is going to be the contact person? Is it the CEO? Is it the CSO, Chief Executive Officer, Security Officer, or Chief Technology Officer? Or is it the system admins, or is it a team of staff or members of staff? Okay, report writing, normalization of data. Teams collect a lot of data during the test, screenshots, write-ups, adaptations from standard guidelines. And you ask yourself, how do I write a document? What is going to be the core content of the document? You're typically going to have an executive summary. You're going to have a methodology. What's the methodology of your reporting or your pen testing? Are you following OAPS? Are you following OCMC? Are you following NIST? what are the kind of framework you're following to write your report? Then your findings and remediation. What are the risk appetite for the organization? What amount of risks would they be able to allow, or should they allow? Then metrics and measures. So you have to itemize how you did band the risks they have, or the severity of the things you found out. Let's say from 0 to 1, you can put a red mark between 7 and 10. That way you have blue, then that way. Then of course you have a conclusion. If time permits me, I'll make another video and examine maybe 3, 4, 5 frameworks for pen testing, and 2 or 3 sample reports, analyze them so that you see what a pen testing report can look like. Okay, how long do I keep the report? How long should the report be stored? Depends on the organization. The POA is often created for a patient tester's final report, right? You might have limits on how long to retain the data and the report based on the contract because of privacy. So your project and the final report that you create, the question is, how long are you going to keep that? So how long are you going to keep the documents that you created? So that's very important when you're trying to say, okay, I'm going to create a report for a company, I'm going to keep it. You might go against privacy, or they might want you to submit the documents, and depending on what is being signed with respect to secrecy. So, so another thing you need to consider also is you might have limits on how long to retain the data. Yes, I talked about that. The handling and disposal. Because you are being told how long you should keep the report, then your point of action, your milestones. This is a project management term. All of your actions and milestones that you've actually itemized while you quoted your document, your proposal, or while you were planning, all of those points of action and milestones that you've created. The question is that the final report you now get, how do you handle that data? How do you treat confidentiality? Findings and recommendations are sensitive in nature and should be treated as confidential. That's why I'm not going to give you a pen test result of another client, but I could show you standard guidelines because of those NDA documents that have been signed. Okay. So mitigation strategies. So how are you going to, what mitigation strategies do you want to employ? Our report should contain a list of not just findings, but recommendations on how to mitigate a vulnerability. Like I said earlier on, this also depends on what you have in your scope, but it's best and standard practice that you do your recommendations, because you're not just going to be told to come find something and you don't recommend, except it's more or less a quasi pen test, how would I put it now? Just like a kind of a pre-pen test, right? You could be called to come and just do a more or less an evaluation, not the actual stuff, right? So in that kind of case, a recommendation might not be there. So just to do some evaluation, but it's standard best practice that you have recommendations and solutions. And what are those? Where are those solutions going to come from? Most of the times, they're not going to be off your head. Now, technology, systems, processes, people, standard guidelines. That's how you're going to know, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And if you've just spent quite some years as a certified IT professional, have background in web, in networks, in cloud, in mobile, it'll be hard for you to offer solutions on what are best standards and best practices. But there are frameworks across the internet that you could use to find what should be done and what shouldn't be done. Best standard practices. And the standard practices and the solutions should hover around people, procedures, policies, platforms. So I call people, that's people. I called procedures, how things are done in organization, processes, very, very similar. Then platforms, softwares, right? So what kind of application, what kind of software are they using, for instance, for multi-authentication, for what processes, what step-by-step action is being used to onboard somebody? Because you can have a flaw in that. Somebody can be able to get through without all of the different verification processes. So these are where your solutions should come from if you're actually proposing mitigation strategies after your pen test. Find this, shared local admin credentials. So these are one of the things you want to be doing. Randomized credentials, every system uses a different password. You should not be having same password across board. Okay, if you find plain text passwords, what should you be telling them? All passwords must be stored as hashes or other encrypted format. So these are standards. If you find no multi-factor authentication, then implement multi-factor authentication by implementing something you know, something you have, something you are, something you do. What is something you know? Your username, your password. What is something you have? Your access card, your swipe card, your NFC card, your biometrics card, your what's it called? Your badge, your what's it called? Anything that you have physically that can enable you have access, right? Something you are. Now, you see your iris, retina scan, your height, your facial, your, let's say your, if the building uses AI to capture people's faces, like you see some access control systems, that's something you are, something you do. So the authentication can be as a result of your actions. What are you doing? Are you accessing the right link? Are you accessing the wrong link? Are you in a particular place? What's your IP address? Where you're accessing that particular application from? That will tell if you're going to be granted access into either the website, the network, the cloud server, the mobile app, or whatever. So if you see that there's no multi-factor authentication, you want to implement any of these multi-factor authentication. So you call them MFAs, multi-factor authentication. So it's either something you know, something you have, something you do. If you want me to make more video explanation of authentication as a subject, I could do like 10, 15 series of an hour or 40 minutes video series on just authentication. And cybersecurity is a very important aspect when it comes to you providing cybersecurity or providing security. If you see that there's SQL injection, make sure developers sanitize user input. So it's the developers now, the software developers, the application developers that are not going to be told what to do. That's why it's good if you want to go into cybersecurity. It's good you understand programming. It's good you pick up a language. You pick up PHP, you pick up Python, you pick up JavaScript, be able to interact with the database. Take up a course on that. If you want me to do such, or if you need mentorship on that, you could inbox or use the email so that you can develop competence in these areas. So finding unnecessary open services. So what are open services? For instance, you see a port number is always open, unused port. What's the downside of having ports that are open and that are not used? Trojans, hackers, backdoors, rats, remote access tools, they can actually get through those unused ports. That's why, for instance, cameras, if not in use, can always be used for hack purposes. Okay, post report activities. So what are the things you should be doing after you have carried out your pen test? So you want to do some cleanup, remove shells, tools, credentials created. At times you might be given a temporary access to be able to allow you to do your work. You want to make sure you remove all of those things. You want to attest your findings. Then you want the client to actually accept. You want to have some follow-up kind of actions or retest. It's good because if you do penetration testing, if you do your job very well, you're going to be called upon every now and then, every 30 days, 90 days, 180 days, that's six months, 1 month, 3 months, or 6 months to come run the test again. Because security is actually a process, not an end. So you want to make sure these things are done frequently so that whatever has been discovered as a result of addition of technology, as a result of starting up a new program, a new service by the organization, by the company, you can actually discover it, patch it up, and they are more secured. Then you're going to atomize all of your lessons learned. Document important information of both the positive and the negative experience that occurred. So lessons learned. So how can it be done better the next time? What could have been done better? So you could atomize all of those things. So just a moment. Just a moment. So how can it be done better? Okay, so that brings me to the end of the pen test training. If you want me to make more videos on pen testing, if you have more questions, please don't forget to ask on a contact, and you can also inbox whatever way. Thank you very much. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to, so that you can also get updates when I post subsequent updates. Thank you very much for taking the pen test course. Catch you in subsequent videos.